For decades, the Jackson name has represented far more than musical success. It has become a symbol of innovation, perseverance, and global influence. Long before Jaafar Jackson ever considered a career in entertainment, the path before him had already been shaped by generations of extraordinary achievement. His father, Jermaine Jackson, helped build the Jackson family's legacy as a member of the Jackson 5, while his uncle, Michael Jackson, redefined what it meant to be a global superstar. Growing up in such an environment meant that music wasn't simply a profession, it was woven into everyday life. Family conversations often revolved around songwriting, rehearsals, touring, and creative expression. According to the transcript, Jaafar was raised in an atmosphere where artistic excellence was treated as both a passion and a responsibility, giving him a unique perspective on what it truly meant to carry the Jackson name. Despite being surrounded by one of the most famous families in entertainment history, Jaafar's early years were remarkably different from what many people imagined. Rather than constantly seeking attention, he developed a reputation as someone who was naturally reserved and quietly observant. Those closest to him recall a young man who preferred learning by watching rather than speaking, carefully absorbing the lessons that surrounded him every day. While the outside world viewed the Jackson family through the lens of fame, Jaafar experienced it as family first. He watched relatives support one another through both triumphs and challenges, gaining an understanding that success required discipline, sacrifice, and humility. According to the transcript, family members recognized his natural musical ability early on, but they also understood that genuine talent needed time to mature rather than being forced into the spotlight before it was ready. As the years passed, Jaafar gradually began discovering his own identity beyond the expectations attached to his surname. He admired Michael's extraordinary accomplishments, but he also understood that becoming another Michael Jackson was never the goal. Instead, he focused on developing his own voice, his own style, and his own confidence, away from constant public attention. Few people outside the family realized that these quiet years would become the foundation for an opportunity unlike anything Hollywood had ever attempted. One day, filmmakers would search for someone capable of portraying the king of pop on screen, and many believed the task was impossible. Yet while the world searched for the right person, that individual had been growing up within the Jackson family all along. Before Jaafar could take on that extraordinary responsibility, however, he first had to understand what it truly meant to live in the shadow of the most famous entertainer the world had ever known. Growing up as Michael Jackson's nephew was unlike anything most people could imagine. Around the world, Michael wasn't simply viewed as a legendary entertainer. He had become a cultural phenomenon whose influence reached every corner of the globe. His music, performances, and humanitarian work inspired millions, making the Jackson name instantly recognizable wherever it was spoken. For Jaafar, however, Michael wasn't just the king of pop. He was family. Behind the sold-out stadiums and worldwide fame was an uncle whose legacy carried both admiration and enormous expectations. According to the transcript, Jaafar grew up understanding that the Jackson name represented decades of artistic excellence, but he also learned that maintaining such a legacy required humility, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the craft. As Jaafar matured, comparisons became unavoidable. People naturally searched for similarities between him and his famous uncle, noticing familiar facial expressions, body language, and musical instincts. Yet those who knew him best understood that he wasn't trying to imitate Michael or recreate the past. Instead, he focused on becoming the best version of himself while quietly developing his own abilities away from public attention. Family members encouraged him to respect Michael's legacy without allowing it to define his entire identity. According to the transcript, those closest to Jaafar believed his greatest strength was his authenticity, explaining that any resemblance to Michael came naturally rather than through deliberate imitation. That quiet confidence allowed him to grow without the pressure of constantly proving himself to the outside world. Living in the shadow of a global icon could have overwhelmed almost anyone, but for Jaafar, it gradually became a source of motivation rather than fear. Instead of seeing Michael's success as an impossible standard, he viewed it as an example of what dedication, preparation, and passion could achieve. Over time, he developed a deeper appreciation for the sacrifices that had built the Jackson legacy, realizing that greatness was never created overnight. It was earned through years of unseen work, relentless practice, and an unwavering belief in one's vision. Those lessons quietly shaped the man Jaafar would become, preparing him for a future no one could have predicted. Long before Hollywood came calling, he had already begun discovering his own artistic voice, a journey that would soon reveal talents capable of surprising even those who knew the Jackson family best. While much of the world remained focused on the extraordinary legacy of Michael Jackson, Jaafar Jackson spent years developing far away from the constant attention of the media. Unlike many celebrity children who grow up under relentless public scrutiny, he was given the opportunity to mature at his own pace. Those years became some of the most important of his life because they allowed him to discover who he was before the world began telling him who it expected him to become. Music was always present, but there was no rush to introduce him to the spotlight. Instead, He spent countless hours listening, practicing, and observing the creative process that had defined his family's history. According to the transcript, Jaafar's early development was marked by patience rather than publicity, with those closest to him believing that genuine artistry required time, discipline, and personal growth before being shared with the world. During those quiet years, Jaafar developed qualities that would later prove just as important as his musical ability. Family members often described him as respectful, humble, and deeply committed whenever he chose to pursue something. Rather than relying on the Jackson name to open doors, he understood that lasting success had to be earned through hard work. He practiced his vocals, refined his sense of rhythm, and gradually built confidence without seeking public recognition. Friends noticed that he carried himself with calm determination, never appearing interested in chasing fame simply because it surrounded his family. According to the transcript, people who worked with Jaafar consistently observed his willingness to learn, accept guidance, and improve through repetition, qualities that reflected the same work ethic that had long defined the Jackson family's approach to performance. Looking back today, it becomes clear that those years away from the spotlight were not years of inactivity. They were years of preparation. Every lesson he absorbed, every rehearsal completed, and every quiet moment of self-discovery helped build the foundation for what was to come. Without realizing it, Jaafar was preparing for one of the most demanding roles ever offered to a young performer. He wasn't simply learning how to sing or dance. He was developing the maturity, patience, and confidence needed to carry one of the most respected names in entertainment history. Those closest to him could already see remarkable potential beginning to emerge, but the rest of the world had no idea what was quietly taking shape. Soon, Jaafar would step beyond the privacy of family life and begin revealing talents that would convince many people he was destined for something far greater than anyone had imagined. For someone carrying the Jackson surname, comparisons were inevitable. Every note Jaafar sang, every movement he made, and every public appearance invited people to search for echoes of Michael Jackson. But while the world expected him to recreate the past, Jaafar focused on something entirely different. He wanted to discover his own artistic identity. Rather than rushing into the spotlight, he spent years refining his vocal ability, studying music, and learning how to communicate emotion through performance. He understood that audiences could immediately recognize imitation, but they would always connect with authenticity. According to the transcript, Jaafar approached music with genuine passion, allowing his own personality and vocal style to develop naturally instead of trying to become a copy of the legendary artist whose legacy surrounded him. As his confidence grew, those closest to him began noticing something remarkable. Jaafar possessed qualities that couldn't simply be taught. There were moments when his smile, expressions, and natural stage presence reminded people of Michael, yet they emerged effortlessly rather than through deliberate practice. His performances carried familiar energy, but they were grounded in his own personality and artistic instincts. Family members recognized that balance immediately. They encouraged him to respect Michael's influence while remaining true to himself, believing that the strongest tribute he could offer was not imitation, but honesty. According to the transcript, people who worked with Jaafar consistently admired his willingness to learn while maintaining an identity that felt genuine, allowing his performances to reflect both the Jackson heritage and his own individuality. Those years of quiet, artistic growth would soon become invaluable. Unknown to Jaafar, Hollywood was beginning to search for someone capable of portraying Michael Jackson in what would become one of the most anticipated music biopics ever produced. Producers faced an almost impossible challenge. They needed someone who could capture Michael's movements, spirit, and humanity without reducing him to an impression. It required far more than physical resemblance or dance ability. It demanded someone who understood the Jackson family from the inside. As conversations about the project continued, one name kept returning to the forefront. The young man who had spent years patiently finding his own voice was suddenly about to receive the opportunity of a lifetime, one that would forever change both his career and the future of the Jackson legacy. For years, the idea of making a feature film about Michael Jackson seemed almost impossible. Countless filmmakers had considered it, but one question always remained unanswered. Who could possibly portray the king of pop? Finding someone who looked like Michael was difficult enough, but capturing his personality, humility, discipline, and unmistakable presence was an entirely different challenge. The role demanded far more than an actor who could sing and dance. It required someone who understood the man behind the global icon. According to the transcript, as discussions surrounding the biopic became more serious, the filmmakers and the Jackson family shared the same priority. They wanted someone who could honor Michael's life with authenticity rather than imitation. As Jaafar's name entered those conversations, the people closest to Michael began looking beyond appearances. They already knew his character. They had watched him grow from a quiet young boy into a disciplined artist who respected both his family's history and the responsibility that came with it. They had seen his dedication during private rehearsals, his willingness to learn, and his commitment to improving without expecting special treatment because of his surname. It wasn't simply that he resembled Michael in certain moments. It was the way he approached his work, with patience, humility, and genuine respect for the craft. According to the transcript, members of the Jackson family believed Jaafar possessed the emotional understanding and natural authenticity needed to represent Michael honestly, making him the person they trusted most with preserving one of entertainment's greatest legacies. When the decision was finally made, it represented far more than a casting announcement. It was a vote of confidence from the very people who had known Michael best. The Jackson family wasn't asking Jaafar to replace a legend or recreate the past. They were asking him to tell Michael's story with honesty, dignity, and compassion, so that a new generation could understand the remarkable person behind the music. For Jaafar, the opportunity carried enormous responsibility, but it also reflected years of unseen preparation that had quietly shaped him into the artist he had become. The world was about to see him in a way it never had before. And once filming began, even experienced Hollywood professionals would find themselves stunned by how completely he disappeared into the role of Michael Jackson. The moment Jaafar Jackson officially stepped into the role of Michael Jackson, his life changed forever. The announcement immediately captured global attention, and with it came enormous expectations. Fans weren't simply waiting for another Hollywood biopic. They were waiting to see whether anyone could faithfully portray one of the greatest entertainers in history. Every detail would be examined, from his voice and movements to his expressions and stage presence. For Jaafar, the challenge wasn't just about learning choreography or memorizing lines. It was about understanding the person behind the legend. According to the transcript, the filmmakers wanted to present Michael as both a global icon and a human being, making authenticity the foundation of the entire production. Preparing for the role required months of intense dedication. Jaafar studied countless hours of archival footage, rehearsed Michael's signature performances, and worked closely with choreographers, vocal coaches, and movement specialists. Every gesture had to feel effortless, every expression had to appear natural, and every performance had to capture Michael's unmistakable energy without becoming a simple impersonation. Those involved with the production repeatedly emphasized that the goal was never to create an imitation. Instead, Jaafar focused on understanding Michael's rhythm, discipline, and emotional connection to every performance. According to the transcript, members of the creative team were impressed not only by Jaafar's physical resemblance, but also by his commitment to portraying Michael with sincerity, patience, and deep respect for his legacy. Perhaps Jaafar's greatest achievement during this process was remembering who he was beneath the costume. While he devoted himself to portraying Michael as accurately as possible, he never lost sight of his own identity. He understood that the role demanded complete commitment, but it also required honesty. Rather than disappearing into imitation, he sought to honor Michael's life through genuine performance and emotional truth. That balance became one of the defining strengths of the production, and gave those closest to Michael confidence that his story was in the right hands. As filming progressed, cast members, crew, and even longtime Jackson family friends began witnessing moments that left them speechless. They weren't simply watching an actor perform, they were watching a transformation so convincing that Hollywood itself would soon struggle to believe what it was seeing. Bringing Michael Jackson's life to the big screen required far more than a talented cast and an experienced director. From the very beginning, everyone involved understood they were telling the story of one of the most recognizable figures in modern history. Every costume had to match the original designs. Every stage performance had to recreate moments that millions of fans had watched countless times. Even the smallest details, hairstyles, body language, vocal delivery, and choreography, were carefully studied to ensure they reflected the real Michael Jackson. According to the transcript, the production team invested enormous time researching Michael's life, performances, and personal history, determined to create a film that felt as authentic as possible while honoring the legacy he left behind. For Jaafar Jackson, the preparation became a full-time commitment. His days were filled with dance rehearsals, movement training, vocal coaching, and extensive character study. He watched archival footage repeatedly, not simply to copy Michael's famous dance moves, but to understand the subtle details that made him unique. The way he greeted people, the way he carried himself between performances, and the quiet confidence that defined his personality. The creative team worked closely together, refining every scene until it captured the emotion as well as the accuracy of the original moments. According to the transcript, those working on the film consistently praised Jaafar's dedication, noting that he approached every rehearsal with remarkable discipline and an unwavering determination to represent Michael truthfully rather than relying on imitation alone. As production continued, something remarkable began happening on set. Crew members who had worked on countless major films found themselves pausing between takes, amazed by how naturally Jaafar embodied his uncle's presence. It wasn't just the appearance or the choreography, it was the feeling that audiences associated with Michael Jackson. That growing confidence reassured the filmmakers that they were creating something far more meaningful than an ordinary biopic. They were preserving the story of an artist whose influence had shaped generations. Yet even with months of preparation behind them, the greatest test still lay ahead. Once cameras captured Jaafar fully transformed into Michael, the first images would leave Hollywood and millions of fans around the world completely stunned. After months of preparation, rehearsals, and careful attention to every detail, the moment finally arrived for the cameras to roll. Until then, only a small group of filmmakers, choreographers, and family members had witnessed Jaafar Jackson's complete transformation into Michael Jackson. But once the first production images and behind-the-scenes footage began emerging, the reaction was immediate. Fans around the world stopped scrolling, looked twice, and questioned whether they were seeing newly restored footage of Michael himself. It wasn't simply the hairstyle or the costume that captured people's attention. It was the posture, the expressions, the effortless movements, and the unmistakable stage presence that felt astonishingly familiar. According to the transcript, the production team believed Jaafar possessed a rare combination of physical resemblance, natural movement, and emotional understanding that allowed him to portray Michael in a way few people thought possible. Inside the film industry, the response was equally remarkable. Producers, crew members, and performers who spent months working alongside Jaafar described moments when it became surprisingly easy to forget they were watching an actor. During rehearsals and filming, he demonstrated an extraordinary ability to recreate Michael's energy without turning the performance into an imitation. Every dance sequence reflected countless hours of discipline, while quieter scenes focused on capturing Michael's personality, kindness, and determination away from the spotlight. According to the transcript, those involved with the production repeatedly praised Jaafar's commitment, explaining that his goal was never to copy his uncle, but to honestly portray the person behind the global icon. That balance quickly became one of the film's greatest strengths and helped build confidence that audiences would experience a genuine portrayal rather than a simple performance. As anticipation for the biopic continued growing, one realization became impossible to ignore. The conversation had shifted from questioning whether Jaafar could play Michael Jackson to wondering how convincingly he had accomplished something many believed could never be done. Expectations for the film reached extraordinary levels, and with them came an even greater responsibility. Jaafar now carried the hopes of millions of fans who wanted Michael's story told with honesty, dignity, and respect. Yet beyond the excitement surrounding the film remained another challenge that no rehearsal could fully prepare him for. Portraying Michael on screen was only the beginning. Once the movie reached audiences around the world, Jaafar would face the lifelong responsibility of carrying forward one of the most influential legacies in entertainment history. As excitement surrounding the Michael Jackson biopic continued to grow, Jaafar Jackson found himself carrying a responsibility that few actors could ever truly understand. He wasn't simply preparing to introduce a new character to audiences. He was representing one of the most celebrated entertainers in modern history. Every performance would be compared to decades of unforgettable concerts, music videos, and public appearances that millions of fans knew by heart. Around the world, people had formed deeply personal connections with Michael Jackson's music, making expectations for the film extraordinarily high. According to the transcript, everyone involved in the project understood that audiences expected authenticity above all else, placing tremendous importance on portraying Michael's life with honesty, respect, and emotional depth, rather than relying on nostalgia alone. For Jaafar, that responsibility extended far beyond the film set. As Michael's nephew, he understood that he wasn't only answering to audiences or critics, he was also representing his own family and preserving a legacy that had inspired generations across the world. Every rehearsal, every scene, and every performance became an opportunity to honor the values that had guided the Jackson family for decades: discipline, creativity, humility, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Rather than allowing the enormous expectations to overwhelm him, Jaafar approached the challenge with quiet determination, trusting the years of preparation that had shaped him long before the cameras began rolling. According to the transcript, those closest to the production consistently admired his professionalism and emotional maturity, believing his genuine respect for Michael's story gave the performance a level of authenticity that could not be manufactured through technical skill alone. As anticipation for the film reached new heights, it became increasingly clear that Jaafar's journey was about more than portraying a legendary performer. It was about introducing Michael Jackson's story to an entirely new generation, while reminding longtime fans why his influence had endured for decades. Whether audiences ultimately judged the film as a cinematic success or not, one fact had already become undeniable. Jaafar had accepted one of the most demanding roles in Hollywood, with remarkable courage and humility. In doing so, he proved that carrying the Jackson legacy was never about replacing the past. It was about preserving it with honesty for the future. And when the world finally witnessed his complete performance, many people would come to the same conclusion. This was not the beginning of a career built on a famous surname, but the emergence of an artist ready to write his own chapter in the remarkable story of the Jackson family. For decades, the Jackson family has occupied a unique place in music history. From the early days of the Jackson 5 to Michael Jackson's transformation into the King of Pop, each generation has contributed something remarkable to the world of entertainment. Now, as Jaafar Jackson steps onto one of the biggest stages of his life, many people are beginning to ask a different question. Not whether he can become another Michael Jackson, but whether he can become the next great story of the Jackson family in his own right. That distinction is important because true legacies are not built through imitation. They are built by honoring the past while creating something meaningful for the future. According to the transcript, those closest to Jaafar have consistently emphasized that his goal has never been to replace his uncle's legacy, but to celebrate it with honesty, respect, and authenticity while continuing to develop his own artistic journey. The release of the Michael Jackson biopic represents more than a major Hollywood production. It introduces Jaafar to millions of people who may be discovering him for the first time. For some viewers, he will always be remembered as the actor who portrayed Michael Jackson. For others, this film may simply become the beginning of a much longer career. What has already impressed many people inside the industry is not only his resemblance to Michael, but his discipline, humility, and willingness to dedicate himself completely to one of the most demanding performances imaginable. Throughout months of preparation, he demonstrated the same patience and work ethic that had quietly shaped his life long before cameras ever began rolling. According to the transcript, the filmmakers and members of the Jackson family viewed those personal qualities as just as important as his talent, believing they reflected the values that have defined the family's legacy for generations. Looking ahead, no one can predict exactly where Jaafar Jackson's career will lead. The entertainment industry changes constantly, and every artist must eventually find a path that belongs entirely to them. But one thing has already become clear. Jaafar has approached an extraordinary responsibility with remarkable maturity, choosing respect over imitation and authenticity over easy comparisons. Whether he continues acting, expands his music career, or explores new creative opportunities, he has already shown that carrying the Jackson name is not simply about preserving history, it is about building upon it with integrity. Perhaps that is why so many people are watching his journey with such anticipation. They are not only witnessing the continuation of one of the most influential families in entertainment history, they are witnessing the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter that reminds us every great legacy eventually finds a new storyteller. And if Jaafar Jackson continues to follow the same dedication, humility, and passion that have guided him so far, his greatest achievements may still lie ahead. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary. Until next time, thank you for watching.